Emperor Vex Thule stood before the massive tactical display in his throne room on Nexus Prime and stared at the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. The defeat of War Commander Thekmal's fleet had sent shockwaves through the Empire, but more disturbing news was arriving every hour. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were beginning to rebel, inspired by humanity's impossible victory. Your Majesty, we have uprising reports from 17 systems. His military advisor, War Marshal Kethvar, reported. The Altarian colonies have declared independence. The Vegan mining worlds have stopped tribute shipments. Even some of our oldest subject species are questioning imperial authority. The Emperor's 4 eyes blazed with fury. In 3,000 years of rule, the Empire had never faced coordinated resistance from multiple species. The very foundation of imperial power was the belief that resistance was hopeless. Now the humans had shattered that belief with a single battle. How many ships can we commit to crush these rebellions? Vex Thule demanded. That depends on how many forces we send against the humans, Your Majesty. Intelligence suggests they are building more vessels like the one that defeated our advance fleet. If we spread our forces too thin, we risk losing battles on multiple fronts. The Emperor moved to his command throne, a crystalline structure that connected him directly to the Empire's vast military network. Through neural links, he could monitor the status of every Imperial fleet across the galaxy. What he saw made his rage grow even stronger. 3 major battle fleets had been diverted to suppress rebellions. 2 more were dealing with coordinated attacks on Imperial supply lines. The humans had somehow managed to destabilize the entire galactic order with a single victory that should have been meaningless in the larger scope of Imperial power. Meanwhile, in the Sol system, Admiral Lisa Kane watched the construction of humanity's new fleet with a mixture of pride and desperation. The victory of the Thunderstrike had bought them time, but intelligence reports made clear that the Empire was mobilizing forces beyond anything humanity could hope to match. How many ships will be ready for the next engagement? Kane asked her Chief of Staff Colonel Gary Mitchell. The Thunderstrike has 3 sister ships nearing completion, Mitchell replied. The UES Stormbreaker, UES Vanguard, and UES Liberty. Each one incorporates improvements based on combat data from the first battle. We should also have the enhanced versions of our smaller vessels ready within 2 months. Kane studied the tactical projections showing what they would face when the Empire's main fleets arrived. Even with their new ships, humanity would be outnumbered by at least 50-1. Victory would require something. Beyond superior technology, they would need perfect tactics and allies, willing to fight alongside them. Captain Ben Walsh brought the Thunderstrike back to Earth's orbital shipyards for resupply and repairs after weeks of patrolling the outer system. His ship had encountered 3 more Imperial scout fleets, destroying each one with minimal effort. But each engagement provided more intelligence about Empire military capabilities and confirmed his worst fears about what was coming. Sir, we're receiving communications from the Altarian Resistance Movement, reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Paul Adams. They're requesting military assistance against Imperial occupation forces. Walsh reviewed the message on his personal display. The Altarians were one of several species that had declared independence following news of humanity's victory. They were offering to share intelligence about Imperial military installations in exchange for Earth support. Send a reply that will consider their request, Walsh ordered, but make it clear that our primary responsibility is defending Earth. We can't spread ourselves too thin, fighting the Empire's wars across the galaxy. Dr. Alex Morgan worked frantically in his expanded laboratory complex, now employing over 500 researchers in multiple facilities across Earth and Luna. Project Titan had evolved into Project Phoenix, a comprehensive program to develop every possible advantage against Imperial technology. We've made significant progress on shield harmonics, Dr. Carol West reported during their daily briefing. The new defensive systems can deflect Zeltharian energy weapons with 93% efficiency. But their kinetic bombardment systems are still a problem. Morgan nodded grimly. The Empire's response to humanity's quantum torpedoes had been predictable. They were developing kinetic weapons similar to the metal rods that had devastated their first fleet. The technological arms race was accelerating at a pace that pushed both sides to their limits. What about the new reactor designs? Morgan asked. Power output is up 400% over our original specifications, replied Dr. Peter Lin. The latest ships will be able to maintain maximum combat effectiveness for extended periods. But we're pushing the boundaries of what our material science can handle. Across the galaxy, War Marshal Kethavar coordinated the largest military mobilization in Imperial history from his command ship, Dark Conquest. Over 2,000 vessels had been assembled into a single massive fleet, enough firepower to destroy entire star systems if necessary. The human homeworld will be made an example, he told his fleet commanders during their final briefing. Every species in the galaxy will see what happens to those who defy Imperial rule. There will be no survivors, no prisoners, no mercy. The assembled war leaders expressed their agreement with the traditional Imperial battle cry, but Kethavar noticed something different in their voices. The easy confidence of previous campaigns was missing, replaced by a wariness that had never existed before. The humans had proven that Imperial forces could be defeated, and that knowledge changed everything. Emperor Vexthul received reports of growing unrest from every corner of his domain. The rebellion was spreading faster than Imperial forces could contain it, and each system that declared independence emboldened others to follow. For the first time in 3 millennia, the Empire faced the possibility of complete collapse. Your Majesty, we must consider negotiation with the humans, suggested his chief advisor. Perhaps some form of limited autonomy could be acceptable rather than total war. The Emperor's rage exploded across the throne room, his psychic powers shattering crystal displays and sending courtiers fleeing in terror. The Empire does not negotiate with inferior species. We conquer or we destroy. There is no third option. But even as he spoke the words, Vexthul knew that the old certainties were crumbling. The humans had introduced an element of chaos into the galactic order that 3,000 years of Imperial rule had not prepared him to handle. Captain Walsh stood on the observation deck of the Thunderstrike and watched as the 3 new human dreadnoughts took their positions in the defensive formation. Each ship represented humanity's finest achievement, carrying weapons that could match anything the Empire possessed. But 4 ships against 2,000 would require a miracle to achieve victory. Sir, long-range sensors are detecting massive fleet movements at the galactic edge, Lieutenant Amy Ross reported. Estimated arrival time is 6 weeks. Walsh nodded and activated his communications link to Admiral Kane. Admiral, request permission to take our ships beyond the solar system. If we're going to fight the Empire's main fleet, I'd rather do it somewhere other than Earth's backyard. Kane's voice came through clearly despite the quantum encryption. Permission granted, Captain. You have full authority to engage Imperial forces wherever you think best. Just remember that if your ships are destroyed, Earth has no other defenses. As the 4 human dreadnoughts moved toward the outer system, Walsh reflected on how much had changed in just 2 years. Humanity had gone from peaceful exploration to galactic warfare, developing technology that rivaled ancient empires and inspiring rebellions across the stars. The final battle was coming, and its outcome would determine not just humanity's survival, but the future of every species in the galaxy. The Empire had ruled through fear and overwhelming force for 3,000 years. Now they would discover whether that power could withstand the human capacity for innovation, determination, and the desperate courage of those who fought for their freedom. Behind the human fleet, Earth's shipyards worked around the clock to build more vessels, knowing that regardless of the coming battle's outcome, the war between humanity and the Empire was far from over. The galaxy would never be the same again, and the age of unquestioned Imperial dominance was coming to an end whether Emperor Vexthul accepted it or not. In the depths of space, 2 civilizations prepared for a confrontation that would reshape the balance of power among the stars, while across the galaxy, enslaved species watched and waited to see if freedom was finally within their grasp. Captain Ben Walsh watched as another Zeltharian cruiser exploded under his ship's weapons fire, and felt a grim satisfaction. The UES Thunderstrike had been in combat for 20 minutes now, and the results exceeded even his most optimistic projections. What had started as an Imperial fleet of 47 vessels was now reduced to 12 heavily damaged survivors, trying desperately to escape. Target the next cruiser in line. Walsh ordered his tactical officer, Lieutenant Amy Ross. Continue the systematic destruction of their fleet. Ross worked at her console with practiced efficiency. The months of simulation training had prepared her for this moment, but the reality of combat against an alien empire still felt surreal. Quantum torpedoes locked on target, sir. Firing now. The Thunderstrike's most advanced weapons launched toward the fleeing Zeltharian ship. Unlike conventional torpedoes, these projectiles could phase shift through enemy shields and armor before detonating inside the target vessel. The technology was based on principles that Dr. Morgan's team had discovered while studying the alien metal fragments. War Commander. Thekmal felt his flagship shudder as another human weapon struck his already damaged hull. The void render was dying around him. With half of his bridge crew dead or wounded, emergency lights flickered as power systems failed throughout the ship. "Sir, we're receiving surrender offers from the remaining fleet," his communications officer reported through a bloody mouth. "Should I respond?" Thekmal stared at the tactical display showing the positions of his surviving ships. Each one was broadcasting distress signals and requesting permission to surrender. In 3 centuries of Imperial conquest, he had never seen anything like this. Enemy species were supposed to be the ones begging for mercy, not Imperial forces. "Denied," he snarled. "No Imperial vessel surrenders to primitives. We fight until the last ship is destroyed." But even as he gave the order, Thekmal knew the battle was already over. The human Dreadnought possessed weapons and defenses that matched or exceeded anything the Empire could field. Worse yet, the humans seemed to understand Imperial technology better than the Imperials themselves. Commander Steve Grant monitored the Thunderstrike's engineering systems from the main reactor room deep in the ship's core. The vessel's fusion reactors were operating at levels that should have been impossible, providing nearly unlimited power to the ship's weapon systems. Every piece of technology on board represented humanity's greatest scientific achievement, compressed into a single desperate project. "Captain, all systems operating at optimal efficiency," Grant reported over the communications link. "We can maintain this level of combat indefinitely." That was exactly what Walsh needed to hear. Intelligence reports suggested that more Imperial fleets were already moving toward human space, and the Thunderstrike would need to be ready for extended operations against superior numbers. On the bridge, Walsh studied the sensor readings from the battle and began forming plans for what would come next. The easy part was over. Destroying this advanced fleet had been like a training exercise compared to what lay ahead. Soon they would face the main Imperial military forces, and those battles would determine whether humanity survived as an independent species. "Lieutenant Ross, begin target analysis of the command ship," Walsh ordered. "I want War Commander Thekmal alive if possible. We need information about Imperial fleet movements and military capabilities." Ross worked her targeting controls with surgical precision, using the Thunderstrike's advanced sensors to identify the least defended sections of the enemy flagship. "I can disable their engines and weapons systems without destroying the bridge, sir. But we'll need to be careful. Their hull is failing in multiple locations." "Do it, but be ready to finish them if they try anything foolish." The Thunderstrike's particle beam arrays fired with pinpoint accuracy, slicing through the Void Render's propulsion systems and remaining weapon mounts. Within minutes, the Imperial flagship was completely helpless, drifting in space with minimal life support. Thekmal watched his ship's final system shut down and faced the unthinkable reality of defeat. Around him, his bridge crew looked to him for orders, but there were no orders that could change their situation. The humans had won a complete victory using technology that shouldn't exist. "Sir, the human ship is hailing us," his communications officer reported. The main screen activated, showing Captain Walsh on his advanced bridge. Behind the human commander, Thekmal could see crew members working at stations that looked disturbingly similar to Imperial equipment. "War Commander Thekmal, your fleet is defeated and your ship is disabled," Walsh said in a calm professional tone. "I'm prepared to accept your surrender and guarantee the safety of your surviving crew members." Thekmal felt rage building inside him. No Imperial officer had ever been forced to surrender to an alien species. The very concept violated everything the Empire stood for. "I will never surrender to primitive mammals," he spat. "Kill us now and be done with it." Walsh appeared genuinely surprised by the response. "That's not how we do things, Commander. We don't murder defeated enemies. Your crew will be treated according to the rules of war and eventually returned to your people." "Rules of war?" Thekmal laughed bitterly. "There are no rules between the Empire and lesser species. We conquer or we destroy. Nothing else matters." "Then maybe it's time you learned a different way," Walsh replied, "because your Empire just lost its first major battle in 3,000 years. And more defeats will follow unless your leaders choose to negotiate." The transmission ended, and Thekmal stared at the blank screen while trying to process what the human had said. Negotiation was not a concept that existed in Imperial military doctrine. Species either submitted completely or faced extinction. But now the Empire faced an enemy that could fight back on equal terms. Hours later, rescue pods from the Thunderstrike were extracting survivors from the destroyed Zeltharian vessels. Each Imperial crew member was processed through medical facilities and held in comfortable quarters aboard the human ship. Walsh personally oversaw the treatment of prisoners, making sure they received proper care despite being enemies. Lieutenant Amy Ross reviewed the tactical data from the battle and marveled at their success. "Sir, we destroyed 35 Imperial vessels and captured the rest with 0 casualties on our side. The new weapon systems performed beyond all projections." Walsh nodded, but his expression remained serious. "This was just the beginning, Lieutenant. Intelligence reports suggest the Empire has thousands of ships, and now they know we can fight them. The next battle will be much harder." Dr. Alex Morgan received the battle data through quantum communication links and immediately began analyzing the performance of each weapon system. The Thunderstrike had validated years of desperate research, proving that human technology could match Imperial capabilities when properly applied. But Morgan also understood the broader implications. Earth had revealed its most advanced military technology to defeat one advanced fleet. The Empire would adapt their tactics and send overwhelming forces that even the Thunderstrike might not be able to handle. Admiral Lisa Kane watched the battle recordings from her command center on Earth and felt both pride and worry. Humanity had won their first victory against galactic conquest, but the war was just beginning. The Thunderstrike would need sister ships, and Earth would need allies if they hoped to survive what was coming. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the emergency transmission from Thekmal's fleet reached Emperor Vexthul on Nexus Prime. The message was brief but contained information that sent shockwaves through the Imperial hierarchy. "Your Majesty, the human species possesses military technology equivalent to our own. They have defeated our advanced fleet and captured War Commander Thekmal. Immediate reinforcement of all available forces is required." Emperor Vexthul read the message 3 times before its full meaning sank in. For 3 millennia, the Empire had faced no serious military opposition. Now a single unknown species from the galaxy's edge had accomplished what no enemy had ever done before. The Emperor activated his command console and began issuing orders that would mobilize the largest military force in Imperial history. If the humans wanted a war, they would discover what it meant to face the full might of the Zeltharian Empire. But deep in his thoughts, Vexthul wondered if victory would be as certain as it had always been in the past. War Commander Thekmal stood on the bridge of his flagship Void Render and felt the familiar satisfaction of another easy conquest ahead. His advanced fleet of 47 vessels had just entered the outer edge of the human solar system, and everything looked exactly as expected. The primitive mammals had built a few orbital platforms and scattered some small warships around their outer planets, but nothing that would pose any real threat to Imperial forces. "Begin the final surrender broadcast," Thekmal ordered his communications officer. "Let the humans hear the voice of their doom." The message went out across all frequencies, translated into the crude human languages. "People of Earth, this is War Commander Thekmal of the Zeltharian Empire. Your time of grace has ended. You will now surrender unconditionally and submit to Imperial rule, or your world will be cleansed of all life as an example to other species who might consider defiance." Thekmal expected the usual response. Panic transmissions, desperate pleas for mercy, maybe some pathetic attempt at negotiation. Instead, he received a simple message from the human military forces positioned near their gas giant planet. "This is Captain Jake Holland of the Earth Defense Fleet. We reject your ultimatum. If you want our world, you'll have to take it." The war commander felt a moment of surprise, then amusement. In 3 centuries of conquest, he had crushed 47 worlds and enslaved billions of beings. No species had ever chosen to fight when faced with Imperial might. These humans would learn quickly why resistance was futile. "Begin the attack," he commanded. "Destroy their pitiful fleet, then proceed to their homeworld." Captain Holland watched the alien vessels approach on his tactical display and tried to keep his voice steady as he gave orders to his small fleet. 14 human ships against 47 Imperial cruisers. The odds were worse than hopeless. But Earth needed time to complete their secret weapon. All ships, execute attack pattern Delta, Holland commanded. Hit their lead vessels with everything we have, then scatter according to plan. Remember, our job is to buy time, not win the battle. The UES Defiance led the charge, followed by the UES Stalwart and 12 other human warships. Their fusion missiles streaked across space toward the Zeltharian fleet, while their energy weapons, charged for maximum power shots, the human weapons, struck the Imperial shields and created brilliant flashes of light. But when the energy faded, the alien ships showed no damage at all. Thekamal watched the pathetic attack and shook his head in disgust. "Return fire," he ordered. "Make this quick." The Zeltharian energy beams reached across space and struck the leading human ships. The UES Stalwart disappeared in a ball of superheated plasma, completely destroyed by a single hit. 2 more human vessels took critical damage and began drifting helplessly as their power systems failed. But Captain Holland had expected this outcome. As his remaining ships scattered in different directions, their sensors recorded everything about the Zeltharian weapons: energy frequencies, targeting patterns, shield configurations, and power outputs. This data streamed back to Earth through quantum communication links, giving Dr. Morgan's team the final information they needed. "Sir, the humans are retreating," reported Thekamal's tactical officer. "Should we pursue and finish them?" "Let them run," the war commander replied. "We have made our point. Now we proceed to their homeworld and accept their surrender." The Imperial fleet moved deeper into the solar system, passing the asteroid belt where human mining stations had been hastily abandoned. Thekamal studied the sensor readings of the inner system and saw exactly what he expected. One small planet with primitive defenses, a few orbital stations, and maybe 1 billion frightened inhabitants waiting to submit to Imperial rule. But as his fleet approached Earth's orbit, something appeared on the long-range sensors that made Thekamal pause. A single massive contact was moving out from behind the planet's moon, something far larger than any vessel in his own fleet. "What is that object?" he demanded. His sensor officer worked frantically at the controls. "Sir, it appears to be a ship, but the readings don't make sense. It's 3,000 meters long and showing energy signatures that match our own capital vessels." Thekamal felt the first stirring of unease. The humans had shown no evidence of possessing such technology during their previous encounter. It must be some kind of space station they are trying to use as a bluff. Continue the approach. Captain Ben Walsh stood on the bridge of the UES Thunderstrike and watched the alien fleet growing larger on his main screen. After months of construction and preparation, his ship was finally ready for its first real test. The vessel around him represented humanity's greatest achievement, a 3-kilometer warship that combined human ingenuity with reverse-engineered Imperial technology. All systems show green. "Captain," reported his engineering chief commander Steve Grant. "Reactors at full power. Weapons charged. Shields at maximum strength." Walsh nodded to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Amy Ross. "Open communications with the enemy fleet. Let's introduce ourselves properly." The transmission reached the Imperial flagship, and Thekamal found himself looking at a human male in a military uniform. Behind the human, he could see a bridge that looked surprisingly advanced, with displays and equipment that seemed almost familiar. "I am Captain Ben Walsh of the UES Thunderstrike," the human said calmly. "You have entered our system with hostile intent and destroyed our ships. This is your only opportunity to withdraw peacefully." Thekamal burst into his grinding laughter. "You dare threaten the Imperial fleet with a single vessel? Even if you have managed to build something larger than your previous ships, you face 47 cruisers of the Empire. Surrender now and your death will be quick." "I don't think you understand," Walsh replied. "We've been studying your technology for the past year. We know how your ships work, how your weapons function, and most importantly, how to destroy them." The human captain made a gesture to someone off-screen, and suddenly Thekamal's sensors exploded with new contacts. The single large ship had launched what looked like hundreds of smaller objects, all moving at incredible speed toward his fleet. "Evasive maneuvers," Thekamal shouted, but it was already too late. The objects were unlike anything in Imperial military records. They appeared to be simple metal rods, but they were moving at nearly the speed of light. When they struck the Zeltharian ships, they passed through shields and armor like they weren't even there, creating massive explosions that tore 3 Imperial cruisers apart in the first seconds of combat. "Impossible. Thekmal whispered as he watched his ships being destroyed by weapons that shouldn't exist. The thunderstrike followed up its kinetic bombardment with energy weapons that matched Imperial firepower. Quantum torpedoes phased through Zeltharian shields before exploding inside enemy hulls. Particle beam arrays focused incredible amounts of energy on precise targets, systematically destroying the alien vessel's weapon systems. Walsh coordinated his ship's assault with the precision of a master tactician. His crew had trained for this moment in thousands of simulations, studying every piece of data collected from the previous battle. They knew exactly where to hit each type of Imperial vessel to cause maximum damage. "Target their command ship," Walsh ordered. "Let's see how their leader handles being on the receiving end." The Thunderstrike's main weapons turned toward the Void Render, and Thekmal watched in horror as beams of energy more powerful than anything his own ship could produce lanced toward him. His shields held for a few seconds, then failed completely. The next salvo punched through his armor and destroyed half of his weapon systems. "War Commander, we're taking critical damage," his tactical officer reported. "Hull breaches on multiple decks. Main reactor operating at 30% power." Thekmal stared at his tactical display and saw that his fleet was being systematically destroyed. In less than 10 minutes of combat, the humans had reduced his force of 47 ships to fewer than 20, and the survivors were all heavily damaged. "Send an emergency transmission to Nexus Prime," he commanded. "Tell the Emperor that we have encountered a species with military technology that rivals our own. Request immediate reinforcement of all available battle fleets." As more Imperial ships exploded under the Thunderstrike's assault, Thekmal realized that everything had changed. The Empire had spent 3,000 years conquering primitive species that could barely fight back. Now they faced humans who had somehow developed weapons that could match Imperial technology in just 1 year. The transmission went out across the galaxy, carrying news that would shake the Empire to its very foundations. For the first time in millennia, a species had successfully resisted Imperial conquest. The age of easy victories was over, and War Commander Thekmal had the unfortunate honor of being the first Imperial officer to learn that lesson the hard way. Dr. Alex Morgan stared at the pieces of alien metal scattered across his laboratory table and felt both excited and terrified. The fragments had been collected by Captain Burke's ship when it passed through the area where the Zeltharian vessels had been. Each piece was small, no bigger than his thumb, but they represented technology that was centuries ahead of anything humans had ever created. "The molecular structure is impossible," said his assistant, Dr. Carol West, as she looked through the electron microscope. "This metal should not be able to exist. It's like they found a way to make atoms behave in ways that break our understanding of physics." Morgan nodded and picked up one of the fragments. It felt warm to the touch and seemed to glow with a faint inner light. "That's exactly why we need to figure out how it works. Admiral Kane gave us 6 months to develop weapons that can fight the Empire. If we can't understand their technology, we have no chance." The underground laboratory in New Geneva was the most secure facility on Earth. 200 of the planet's best scientists worked here around the clock, all focused on Project Titan. They had been given unlimited resources and told that the future of humanity depended on their success. Morgan walked through the main laboratory hall and saw teams working on different parts of the puzzle. One group was trying to recreate the energy signatures they had detected from Zeltharian weapons. Another team worked on shield technology, attempting to build defenses that could stop whatever the aliens might throw at them. A third group focused on propulsion systems, trying to match the incredible speed the Empire's ships had demonstrated. "Dr. Morgan, you need to see this," called Dr. Peter Lynn from across the room. He was the team leader for weapons development and had been working with barely any sleep for the past month. "We've made a breakthrough with the particle beam research." Morgan hurried over to Lynn's workstation where several engineers were gathered around a test chamber. Inside the chamber, a thick steel plate had been completely melted through, leaving a hole so clean it looked like it had been cut with a precision laser. "We managed to recreate the energy frequency we recorded from their weapons," Lynn explained. "But here's the problem. It takes our entire facility's power output to fire one shot. The aliens seem to have energy sources we can't even imagine." "What about fusion reactors?" Morgan asked. "Could we build bigger ones?" "We've been working on that too," replied Dr. Susan Clark from the Power Systems team. We think we can increase output by maybe 300%, but that's still not enough. We need something completely different. Morgan felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Every day that passed brought them closer to the Empire's deadline. Intelligence reports suggested that Zeltharian scout ships had been seen at the edge of human space, watching and waiting. Meanwhile, on the other side of the solar system, Captain Jake Holland stood on the bridge of his flagship UES Defiance and reviewed the pathetic state of Earth's military forces. His fleet consisted of 14 ships, the most powerful vessels humanity had ever built, but they seemed like toys compared to what was coming. "Sir, we've completed the war game simulation," reported his tactical officer, Commander Beth Price. "Even with our best performance, we last maybe 10 minutes against a single Zeltharian cruiser." Holland studied the battle projections on his screen. The computer models were not encouraging. Earth ships were faster and more maneuverable than the alien vessels, but that advantage disappeared when faced with weapons that could destroy them in one hit. "What about hit-and-run tactics?" Holland asked. "If we can't fight them directly, maybe we can slow them down and buy time for the scientists." "We've run those scenarios too, sir. We might be able to destroy a few of their smaller ships, but their main battle fleet would still reach Earth. And once they get there, it's over." Holland walked to the observation deck and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years was preparing to wipe out humanity. His 14 ships and their crews of 3,000 people were all that stood between Earth and total destruction. Back on Earth, Admiral Lisa Kane sat in her office reading reports from around the globe. Every major nation had committed their full resources to defending the planet. Weapons factories worked at maximum capacity, producing missiles, energy weapons, and defensive systems. Space elevators ran constantly, carrying military equipment to orbital platforms. But Kane knew that conventional weapons would not be enough. She had seen the sensor data from Burke's encounter. The Zeltharian ships had shields that could absorb nuclear weapons without damage. Their hulls were made from materials that seemed almost indestructible. Worst of all, they had thousands of these ships while humanity had barely a dozen combat vessels. Her assistant brought her the latest update from Project Titan. Dr. Morgan's team had made progress, but they were still far from producing anything that could match Empire technology. Kane made a decision that would commit Earth's entire industrial capacity to a single desperate gamble. "Send orders to all shipyards," she told her communications officer. "Cancel all current construction projects. We're building one ship and we're putting everything we have into it." The message went out to shipyards across the solar system. The massive construction facility at Luna Station received new blueprints that made the engineers stare in disbelief. The ship they were being asked to build was 3 kilometers long and would require more resources than had been used in the previous decade of space construction. Dr. Morgan received the news while working on the final tests of their new reactor design. The prototype had been successful, producing energy outputs that were finally approaching Zeltharian levels. But scaling it up to power a ship the size Kane wanted would require manufacturing techniques that had never been attempted. "Can we actually build this thing?" asked Dr. West as she looked at the construction plans. "We have to," Morgan replied. "It's our only chance. If we can combine everything we've learned, the new reactors, the improved weapons, the enhanced shields, into one ship, we might be able to surprise them." The construction began immediately. Thousands of workers labored around the clock to build humanity's first true warship. The vessel would carry weapons that could theoretically match Zeltharian firepower, armor that might withstand their attacks, and shields that could protect against their energy beams. Captain Ben Walsh was chosen to command the new ship. He was one of Earth's best military officers, with experience in both space combat and large vessel operations. As he reviewed the specifications for his future command, he felt a mixture of pride and fear. "The UES Thunderstrike," he said to his executive officer, Lieutenant Amy Ross. "She'll be the most powerful ship humanity has ever built." "Will it be enough, sir?" Ross asked. Walsh looked at the tactical projections showing what they would face when the Empire arrived. Even with all their improvements, they would be outnumbered by at least 100 to 1. Success would depend on catching the aliens completely by surprise and hitting them harder than they expected. "It has to be," Walsh replied, "because if the Thunderstrike fails, there won't be a second chance." As the months passed, reports came in from across human space. The Empire's advanced scouts had been detected moving closer to Earth. Long-range sensors showed massive fleets gathering at the galaxy's edge, preparing for what the aliens clearly expected to be an easy conquest. With only 2 months left before the deadline, the Thunderstrike was nearing completion. Dr. Morgan's team had solved most of the technical challenges, and the ship's weapon systems were more powerful than anyone had dared hope. But everyone knew that one ship, no matter how advanced, could not defeat an entire empire. The real question was whether humanity's surprise would be enough to buy them time to build more ships like the Thunderstrike. Earth's fate now rested on technology that had never been tested in real combat, operated by crews who had trained only in simulations, facing an enemy that had never been defeated in 3,000 years of galactic conquest. Captain Ryan Burke watched the stars through the main screen of his ship UES Horizon and felt proud of how far humanity had come. His crew of 35 people were the first humans to travel this far from Earth. They had been in space for 6 months now, exploring new star systems and looking for planets that might support life. Everything seemed peaceful until the alarm started ringing. "Captain, we have multiple contacts approaching fast," called out his navigation officer, Lieutenant Kate Miller. Her voice stayed calm, but Burke could hear the worry underneath. The Horizon was built for exploration, not fighting. They had basic shields and a few small weapons, but nothing that could handle a real battle. Burke moved to the command chair and studied the sensor readings. 5 large ships were coming toward them at incredible speed. Each vessel was huge, maybe 10 times the size of the Horizon. Their design looked unlike anything in human records. Long, crystalline structures that seemed to glow with their own light. "Try to send them a greeting message," Burke ordered. "Tell them we come in peace and want to talk." Before Lieutenant Miller could send the message, the alien ships surrounded the Horizon. One of them sent a communication signal that made the ship's computers work hard to translate. When the message came through, it made everyone on the bridge go quiet. "Primitive vessel, you will surrender immediately. Lower your shields and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction." The voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. Burke looked at his crew and saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. These were good people who had volunteered for this dangerous mission, knowing they might never return home. "This is Captain Ryan Burke of the Earthship Horizon," he replied. "We are explorers from the planet Earth. We wish to establish peaceful contact with your people." A few minutes passed before another message came through. This time the translation was clearer, and Burke could make out more details about who they were dealing with. "You speak for the species called humans. I am Commander Zektar of the Zeltharian Empire. Your people are unknown to us, which means you are not part of our domain. This is unacceptable." The main screen flickered and showed the interior of the alien ship. Burke saw a creature that stood at least 9 feet tall with a hard shell-like skin that looked blue-black in the strange lighting. It had 4 arms and eyes that glowed red. Behind it, Burke could see other similar creatures moving around what looked like a military command center. "All species in this galaxy serve the Empire," Commander Zektar continued. "For 3,000 years we have brought order to the stars. Every world, every people, every thinking being acknowledges the supremacy of Emperor Vexthul. You will do the same." Burke felt his heart beating faster but kept his voice steady. "We would be happy to meet with your leaders and discuss relations between our peoples. Earth has much to offer in terms of knowledge, art, and trade." The alien commander made a sound that might have been laughter, but it sounded more like machinery breaking. "Trade? You misunderstand your position, human. The Empire does not trade with inferior species. You will submit completely or face annihilation." "What exactly does submission mean?" Burke asked, though he was starting to get a bad feeling about the answer. "Your homeworld will provide tribute of resources and workers. Your military will be dissolved. Your government will be replaced by imperial administrators. Your people will serve the Empire in whatever capacity we deem useful. This is the natural order." Burke looked around his bridge crew. Lieutenant Miller was recording everything for transmission back to Earth. His security chief, Sergeant Dan Carter, had his hand near the weapons controls, though they all knew their small guns would do nothing against these massive ships. "I need to discuss this with my government," Burke said. "This is not a decision I can make alone." "You have 1 standard galactic cycle to comply," Commander Zektar replied. "That equals approximately 1 of your Earth years. Use this time wisely. Gather your leaders and explain to them the reality of their situation. The Empire has conquered thousands of worlds. Resistance always ends in complete destruction. The alien ships began to move away, but Commander Zektar sent one final message. Do not attempt to follow us or interfere with Imperial operations. We will be watching your world. When the time limit expires, our battle fleets will arrive to receive your surrender. If you choose to fight, your species will be eliminated as an example to others who might consider defiance. Burke watched the alien vessels disappear into hyperspace, leaving the horizon alone among the stars. The bridge was completely quiet for several minutes as everyone tried to process what had just happened. Get me a secure channel to Earth Command, Burke finally said. Priority Alpha emergency transmission. As his communications officer worked to establish the connection, Burke thought about what he would tell the people back home. Earth had been so proud of their achievements in space technology. They had fusion reactors, faster than light travel, and energy shields. Compared to most science fiction stories, they were doing pretty well. But compared to an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, Earth was nothing more than a small, isolated world that had just been noticed by giants. The Horizon's sensors had recorded everything about the alien ships, their energy signatures, their weapons, their defenses. All of it was far beyond anything humans had ever built. The transmission to Earth finally went through, and Burke found himself looking at Admiral Lisa Kane, the head of Earth's Deep Space Defense Force. She had been the one to approve this exploration mission, and now Burke had to tell her that humanity faced extinction. Admiral, we have made contact with an alien civilization, Burke began. They call themselves the Zeltharian Empire, and they have given Earth 1 year to surrender completely or be destroyed. Admiral Kane's face showed no emotion, but Burke could see her mind working fast. Send me all the data you collected, Captain. Every sensor reading, every communication, everything. And get back to Earth as fast as your ship can travel. As the horizon turned toward home, Burke wondered if 1 year would be enough time for humanity to find a way to survive what was coming. The Empire had conquered thousands of worlds and ruled for 3 millennia. What could one small planet possibly do against such overwhelming power?